Welcome to the Scrum Sessions podcast. Here in Dallas, I am Q, and to my friend in Berlin, Gary on.
Hey everyone. So today we want to talk about a very special topic, and that is our pet peeves about agile coaches, right? Because sometimes they can just drive you crazy. So Q, what's your major pet peeve about agile coaches?
Well, I would have too many, but the first one, and it's becoming kind of an obsession for me, is people who take the Scrum Master class, and after 2 days the Scrum Master class, they didn't even did the test yet. They didn't even go through the exam. They go on LinkedIn and they put their Agile coaches. Well, the problem with that is A, they don't have the experience, B, they don't have the expertise, and C, they're giving a bad name to everybody who is actually doing professional coaching. So that's my biggest one. And I have a few more. So go ahead, my friend.
Actually, this is at the very top of my list as well. And you know, it's almost like as if being a Scrum Master isn't good enough, right? And nothing could be further from the truth. A great Scrum Master is worth the weight in gold, right? And you'll always notice that as soon as you had a good one and then she or he left and you're stuck without one, for example, or with a bad one. So there's nothing wrong with being a Scrum Master. It's not that you're better because you're an Agile coach, right? And it's not a protected term, right? It's not a trademark. So, you know, you're just assuming the mantle of something that clearly you aren't doing well and you're skipping a major step that is actually quite helpful. And you know, I once had a situation when I was a beginner. I was was not quite a beginner. I was doing my first scaled implementation, and I got into that position because no experienced agile coach was available. Right, I was a pretty good Scrum Master, and so they asked me to actually organize the scaling of 5 teams, and they were like huge teams. So it was about 150 people in total. And then after a while, it was inside of a big European company. After a while, they got their agile coaching practice members, the head of that agile practice, to come in and look at this project, right? And so we're talking about a company that does 2-digit billion euros in sales, right? So it's a huge organization that most Europeans would probably recognize. And so they have these special coaches that fly in from their headquarters, right? And they go into these different countries, into the different projects. And so I was like really impressed. I was like, wow, now I'm meeting the real pros, right? And so we had the meeting with the project managers. I was invited and those guys from the Agile practice were there. And so I was like, oh man, this is so cool. I can learn so much from them. And during the talk, it went on for about an hour, I was like growing like, something isn't quite right. And so then afterwards, you know, I just snuck up to one of them and said, okay, so what cool projects have you done before? And you know what? As it turned out, and this was kind of their QRF, right? Their quick reaction force that they sent into the real big trouble. This agile coach, he had been the product owner of an internal website, just one internal page, right, where you can see what's on the menu in the food court, right, for 13 weeks. That was his qualifications to become an agile coach in this quick reaction force to solve big problems. And this is driving me bonkers. It's nothing wrong being a Scrum Master. It's nothing wrong being a product owner. It's actually great. But don't assume the mantle of an agile coach if you don't have the experience to back it up.
Yeah, and that's actually, as you know, as we're talking right now, there were huge layoffs in the IT scenario, right? And a lot of people, including myself, got into that boat, right? And it's also confusing because I get calls from recruiters and they seem to think that an agile coach at team level, an agile coach at enterprise level or portfolio level, which some prefer to use that term, and Scrum Masters are all the same thing, right? And that, of course, causes a lot of misunderstanding, and it's causing confusion in the industry itself. Because you may hire somebody, especially if you are new into this, right? Let's say you just want to start doing Scrum or something like that, right? And then you hire the wrong person. And it's becoming a nightmare. And I always like to make the differentiation between a consultant and a coach, right? Because most of the time, I'm hired more as a consultant, right? Leadership, which is usually the group I work with, is interested to say, hey, we have this thing, how would you go about this, right? And they are not interested in the idea of coaching, which is to make people realize that they have the answer. They want the answers and they want the answers now, right? And that's also another differentiation. So another problem I have with the true coaches, and I'm not saying Scrum Masters are not coaches, but the people who have experience coaching or even consulting, is they go to a place, and I got piles of that, and they want to start coaching people. Oh, what you think about that? How do you go about that? You know, we all know the powerful questions and all the other lingo, right? And the problem is that actually irritates people greatly because they hired you because they don't know what you do. And the first thing you go there and you say is, how do you feel about that? What would you do about that? Well, they don't know. So I think a lot of times people get stuck on a certain behavior. They say, well, a coach is not supposed to tell them what to do. And they don't understand that a good coach adapts to the situation. So a good coach sometimes is a teacher, sometimes is a mentor, sometimes is a coach, sometimes is a consultant. And that's my second pet peeve. Number one is people claiming that they are Agile coaches because they took today's Scrum Master class.
Yeah.
And the second one is getting stuck in the stance, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. There are different stances. And actually, as a professional coach myself, the value of professional coaching, in my opinion, is very, very high. But the important thing is, and a lot of these people aren't realizing it, if you're actually trained as a professional coach, you know that you can't just walk around and start doing professional coaching on people. That's a big no-no. That's almost like bordering on malpractice, right? It's like a therapist going around and starting to do therapy on you without any permission, without any talk about this before, right? So you don't just, if you actually know this stuff, you don't just go in and start bombarding people with powerful questions. You make a contract first, right? And so this actually again shows that they don't know what they're doing. They have just heard, oh, there are a couple of powerful questions. Cool. If you like them and you think this is interesting, then learn the stuff and then you can do it properly. And that especially means getting permission and not just starting to do, Jedi mind tricks on people when they just actually want to have an answer. So yeah.
No, it brings actually my third pet peeve. Okay, a lot of people confuse coaching with being a psychologist or psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And I'm neither of them. You know, so I think several times people come with problems that they influence work, but they're not work problems, right? And they start talking about it because you're probably the only person who is listening. And several times I said, stop it, because that's getting into a territory that I am not qualified to cover. Now, I also see a lot of coaches that go there and they start dispensing advice that actually influences personal choices and things like that. And that's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. And so those are the three pet peeves.
Man,
be careful.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, man. You're really getting me triggered because this is really irresponsible, right? I know exactly what you're talking about. And, it almost seems like these people would have wished to become a psychologist or a therapist or something like this, and they just jump at this opportunity. And the fact of the matter is, just because you're an Agile coach and you've done a lot of retros or, some team workshops or something like that, you're not qualified to treat people in these conditions, right? And in my experience, it's often the coaches that talk about safe spaces and, being secure in how you communicate with other people that then, go in and actually violate all the standards of decency, but of professionalism as well. If you're not trained to be a psychological therapist, please don't start to play one as a Scrum Master or as an Agile coach. It's an absolute no-no. And you can actually do a lot of damage, right? There are people that really need help. And so please refer them to help and don't start trying to fix those people because they might jump off a bridge, right? So this is actually not even funny anymore. And I've seen this in practice and I find it to be absolutely irresponsible.
Yeah, and it's more common than you think. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, back in 2017, we're in Dublin for Scrum Gathering, right? And I believe it was on Tuesday evening. May have been Monday or Tuesday, I don't remember. there was a gathering in the evening, upstairs in the hotel and conference center, and we're talking about coaching, and we broke up in different groups, right? And we are trying to simulate coaching questions and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we had a very good group. I mean, there were people with lots of experience. I had over a decade of this. There were a few trainers in there, and we are just simulating situations, right? And then, okay, we took a break, and then we came back. And so what's going to be the next scenario? And then one guy comes, he actually joined our group, and he decided to talk about problems in his marriage and all that stuff. And I was like, whoa. And then somebody else said, oh, let's talk about it. I said, you know what? I'm out of here. Thank you very much, guys. This is not what I'm qualified to do.
Yeah.
I can talk about process improvement. I can talk about feedback. I can talk about product. I can talk about marketing. I can talk about business agility. But this is not on my area. Seek professional help, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my second point is, I don't know, I'm going to get some flack for that. But if coaches, coach being somebody that has more experience, especially people that deem themselves to be enterprise coaches, so not so much focused on teams, being a team coach, right? Having let's say 5 to 6 to 8 teams or something like that, where you help the Scrum Masters and do some targeted interventions. But people who work with managers, and if they don't know any business stuff. It drives me wild. I know a lot of people won't agree, and there's nothing wrong with coming from diverse backgrounds. I had hired an archaeologist, and she was a great Scrum Master, right? And you wouldn't have guessed it from having been trained as an archaeologist, but she was great. So there's no issue with that. And I have a business background, and let all of you guys in on a secret. Business is really easy, right? It's just big words, and it's really simple stuff. And I expect somebody that has a lot of experience to be able to talk to senior leaders and understand what they are talking about when they talk about cash flow, when they talk about net present value, right? You don't have to have an accounting degree, but you have to know, first of all, some of the lingo, and then know how to talk to them, because they are always data-driven, they are always business case-driven, right? And then you see the senior coaches, supposedly senior coaches, and then just mumble in Agile lingo, and you just see the lights turn off inside of the senior leaders' heads. And it's like, guys, this is why engineers get an MBA, for example. There's so much free online training where you can just, level up this stuff, and then you can actually get things done, because what you're doing in that position, never mind that the senior leaders aren't interested. The problem is you're really hurting your teams and your division and your transformation, because you cannot speak in the language of the people that actually make the decisions. And that is ruining you. It's like a diplomat, like an ambassador to another country, and he doesn't speak the target language, and he just, creates problems all along. It doesn't make any sense. You are actually the connector, the interface to them, and you need to speak the language.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I think the reason you hired archaeologists, they're good at digging, right? I couldn't resist saying
Very
that.
Good, yes.
I could not resist saying that, I had to put that one in. But jokes aside, you are right. And there is another problem too. There is the problem of people who drop lingo because it's cool to speak Lingonese. I just made that up. But that's not cool with the people that you are addressing. And again, it's poor understanding it's poor situation awareness, right? If you're talking to a software person, you should talk one way. If you're talking to a hardware person, you should talk to another way. Talking to a business person, you should talk to another way. You have to communicate in their language and not the other way around. They may tell you, I don't care what you call this a retrospective. For me, it's called, I don't know, post-mortem. I'm using the old term, right? You have to communicate on their language. The problem is, people have to understand the principle behind something, and what you call, it doesn't matter, right? You can use words in German. I can use words in another language, but if we know what they are, it doesn't matter, right? We just switch. Now, another thing that it's a pet peeve of mine is the people who work at portfolio level, enterprise level. They think they're gods, and by that I mean, I like from time to time to actually go coach teams, and I like to do that, right? I do both. I do enterprise level, portfolio level, and team level. But even when I'm hired as an enterprise coach, I like to go to the teams because you have to keep your feet grounded and understand what is going on a daily basis. And I had, right now that everybody's looking for a job, I had people that I know, Q, there aren't that many enterprise jobs out there, right? I said, well, take a team coach gig. I'm not going to do that. I'm an enterprise coach. I said, well, that is already telling me that I wouldn't hire you for either one of the two. And I seen the same problem with Scrum trainers, which I worked with one a few years ago when I was in DC, who has been a trainer for a long time. And he once told me, I haven't changed my deck in 10 years. I said, why not? Well, because nothing ever changed. I said, well, that's funny. I change my deck every time there's a class. I make a couple changes for the next one. And I think it's the same mentality. If you're going to say, I am God because I'm an enterprise coach, I am not going to deal with the team stuff. Well, I have news for you. The people you communicate, your peers and the leadership that are up there, they're a team. So if you lost context that you are working with a team, you're not doing your job well.
Yeah.
So get off of your high heels and actually understand that if you lose contact with what happens on a daily basis, you are not going to be good at your job.
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes for everywhere, right? This is about politicians that don't know what's going on in people's lives and so on. Yeah, and so my third one is, and this might be, or this is a little bit tricky, it's specific to high-level coaches that actually negotiate engagements with the customers. And what really bugs me is if they don't tell the truth when they're selling the engagement, right? So I, of course, understand that, there's always pressure to perform, to sell, to get the customer and so on. But what a lot of people, and it actually doesn't always need to have to be the agile coach, right? Sometimes they are part of a larger consultancy and they don't have any control over it. But what really bugs me out, and I think it creates so much damage and is the cause for a lot of failed transformations, is that an agile transformation is often being sold like a process improvement, like, oh, we're gonna install this software on your factory floor and it's gonna run 1.4% better than before, right? And so to be honest, this is often what the customers want to buy, right? Because they don't want to have this transformation where they actually have to change themselves, all the managers, right? So this is kind of what they're expecting. This is kind of what they want, and so this is being sold to them. So far, that's good, right? You're giving the customer what they want, but actually a transformation like this is 100% guaranteed to fail, right? And because there is an element of personal change for the leadership involved, and you cannot have a successful transformation unless the leadership actually changes as well. And maybe, you can start off on the wrong foot and then turn it around and get the involvement later on. But this is just creating so many problems. And so what really drives me crazy is if people sell this kind of stuff, if they know well that this isn't going to work, right? Because some coaches do that. They sell this simple transformation. Oh, you don't have to change. Nobody has to change. And it's still going to be twice the work in half the time, right? And in actuality, what they're creating is a setup for the customer to fail in that agile transformation. And for all the Scrum Masters, for all the product owners, for all the team members, for all the other coaches to really have their lives ruined by expectations that they cannot fulfill and by changes they want to implement that are impossible to get through.
Yeah, which brings the point. It's a practice that I'm shocked that a lot of coaches don't do it. Not to throw another lingo, is a coaching contract. And I would even call it a memorandum of understanding if you don't want to use lingo, right? Say, listen, what you guys want as leadership with this? Why you are going to do a so-called agile transformation? Or why are you calling me here to fix, in your words, fix the transformation that's not going well? What are your expectations? What you expect from this, right? Who's gonna say it's done, right? So I think a lot of those things are easy, and it's basically a half a page thing, right? And it's like, okay, we expect this, we expect that, expect etc. And you as a coach has to provide this and this and this and that. And here how we're gonna check the the progression of this thing until we call your engagement done and etc. And a lot of people don't do that. So I've seen people, including people at portfolio and enterprise level, that just parachute in there because somebody hired them, and then they start changing things. And I don't really feel that they understand what they're changing. And I'm not the only one, because I've been hired in situations to go fix something that was going wrong because they didn't do the basic, what I call Agile hygiene, right? Let's clean up the stuff before we start. And that's also for me a mark that perhaps you shouldn't be doing that as a career choice. And if you're doing that, do you have the experience and the expertise to understand why this is not going to work? People are very often, oh, let's jump into the portfolio coach bandwagon because there is a lot of revenue there for me. Yeah, but if the job sucks, if you don't do a good job, right, it's bad for everybody.
Yeah, and especially on that level, you're actually talking about often the existence of the organization, right? So if it's a huge, let's say, insurance or bank or something, of course, it's not going to be affected by you messing up your executive coach job, right? Your enterprise coach job. But actually, this is why leadership hires enterprise coaches, to increase their survivability and not to decrease it. And you can actually do a lot of damage for everyone involved. And I get it. You want to make the sale, you want to get paid. But, that still doesn't make it good because you're doing damage to everyone involved.
Well, I think the best way to make a sale, it's your reputation as being efficient, as being proficient, right? And being professional. And I think a lot of people just say, okay, I made the sale, I'm going to stay there for a year or whatever, right? And then I leave. Yeah, but what did you leave behind, right? Because I'll tell you, I have reference from people who worked in the past, including one that became a very good friend of mine. It's on LinkedIn, who said, Q is the only consultant I ever met who actually cares. Her words, not mine.
Yeah.
Very senior person, right? And she said that's on my LinkedIn profile. Q is the only consultant I ever met who cares. So yeah, you can go there and sell stuff, and that's fine, right? But what you leave behind is a disaster in most cases. It looks bad for everybody. And those people are not going to help you find your next gig when you need a reference, right? So yeah, you can be myopic and say, okay, I make a fast buck right now, but I don't know when the next fast buck is going to come, because nobody's going to help me when I need references of the quality of my work.
Cool.
Very good. I think we're good for today. And I have to do a daily Scrum thing with a few people. It's going to be my last one before I officially leave tomorrow morning.
Oh.
And let's do the closing. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed the talk today. We're very passionate about several things that affect all of us. Even if you're not a coach, they affect all of us. So I'll hope to see you in the next episode of the Scrum Sessions for...
Dude! You're
it was so good!
Don't just go off a script in the middle, because it'll just be more difficult for retouching. So just start the sign-off.
No, let's finish it. Okay, starting again, ignore the first one. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. We'll be back soon. And I'm signing off here from Dallas and back to my friend in Berlin, Gary on.
Thank you, Q. This was very interesting, and I know we could go on for hours. Guys, if you have any pet peeves about Agile coaches, then please put them into the comments, because it'll be a thrill to read them, and maybe we'll talk about them in a later episode. So thank you everyone for watching, and stay tuned for the next episodes. Take care and bye-bye.